Is AI coming for your leadership? That's a question underneath a lot of conversations right now, and it's a valid one. So let's look at it. AI is the most disruptive technological innovation since the last one. And the last one was the most disruptive since the one before. I'm not minimizing what's happening right now. What's happening right now is significant. Leaders come to me to talk about AI strategy, marketing, integration, how to use it, how to position around it, and how to stay ahead of it. And we have that conversation, but it rarely stays there. Because underneath the strategy conversation is usually a more personal one. Every generation of leaders has stood in a version of this moment. Not the same technology, but the same experience. New tools arriving faster than the culture could absorb them. Employees adapting in ways leadership hadn't anticipated. Change moving faster than the organization could keep up with it. And underneath all of it, this question lands on the leader. What does this mean for me? Not just the organization or the team. Me, my relevance, my value, my place in what's here and what's coming. That question is in the room, even if it's not spoken. And if you're like a lot of leaders I'm talking to, if you've wondered whether AI is going to replace what you bring to the table, you're in really good company. You're paying attention to the right thing. And here's why the AI conversation rarely stays about AI. Right now, AI is uncontained, exponentially faster and more intelligent than just last week, more present in our work, our decisions, our relationships than most of us invited or even expected. For leaders, that's uncomfortable, to say the least. These aren't technology questions, and this isn't going to be a technology conversation. This is a conversation about leaders and about your leadership. And to answer the question that I opened with, whether AI is actually coming for your leadership, I want to take you somewhere unexpected today. A Kentucky Rickhouse, 100 years ago, because the answer may already be sitting in a barrel of whiskey. Welcome to Crafted Clarity. I'm Steve Moscato, and today we distill. The leaders I'm spending time with right now are asking the best questions they can. But those questions are personal, and personal questions don't usually have a place in the strategy meeting. So leaders carry them alone, in the car on the way home, at the end of a long day as they're preparing for the next one. And that's exactly why we talk about them here on Crafted Clarity. Because this is where leaders can sit with the tension between what they built and what they're built for, and not be alone in it. There are a lot of them in this conversation. Think about what leaders have already navigated in just the past several years. A pandemic that rewrote how and where we work. Remote teams, hybrid teams, employees who left and never came back the same way. Economic uncertainty that wouldn't settle. A pace of change that rarely lets anyone catch their breath. Many leaders were just starting to feel like they understood the landscape again. Then AI arrived. And for a lot of leaders, something in them recognized the shape of the moment before they could even name it. Here we go again. Except this time it feels bigger. Not just moving faster, it's questioning things that previous disruptions left alone. The expertise, the experience, the hard-won judgment that took decades to develop. That's not a crisis. That's an honest response to an unprecedented moment. And I know this feeling personally. I once had a boss who told us that email wasn't a form of business communication. He required us to continue writing memos in memo format to officially communicate. I'm not making this up. And I tell that story not to make fun of him, because I watched him. He wasn't resistant. He was careful. He was trying to protect the organization from something he didn't fully understand yet. And to him, that felt like leadership. He was doing his best to navigate something genuinely new. Something that felt like it was going to change everything. And it did change everything. And then it became Tuesday. Email became how we work. The internet became how we sell. Social media became how we listen to customers. And eventually, how they hold us accountable. Every disruption that was going to change everything eventually just became normal. Good leaders navigated all of it, and great leaders learned how to leverage it. That's actually remarkable when you stop and think about it. But why does AI feel different? In reality, the AI disruption may follow the same arc as everyone before it. It will be adopted, and it will normalize. Leaders will navigate it, and someday someone will tell a story about the time their boss thought AI was going to replace everyone, and the room will laugh the way that we laugh at that memo story. But we're not there yet. And right now, in this moment, leaders are feeling something the previous disruptions didn't quite touch in the same way. Those disruptions changed how we work. This one is questioning something they left alone. The thinking, the judgment, the expertise that took decades to develop. That's why the question underneath every AI conversation isn't really about the technology. It's about the leader. I want to take you somewhere. A Kentucky Rickhouse, early 1900s. The air is thick with the smell of grain and oak, and something that's been aging long enough to become something else entirely. The wood floors are stained dark because of decades of use. The barrels are stacked 3 stories high, each one holding its own quiet secret. This is a place that runs on patience. And the people who run it have given their lives to this craft. Not a title, not a certification, a life. They started young, learned by watching, by ruining batches and understanding why, by standing at the still long enough that the rhythm of it became their rhythm, by developing a nose, a literal nose for when something was right and when something was off, long before any instrument could confirm it. They know this place the way that they know their own hands. Then one morning, something new arrives. New equipment, gleaming, precise. The kind of machinery that makes the foreman's eyes light up and the owners talk about efficiency and yield and consistency. And everybody's excited. But the distillers, the ones who's given their lives to this, they're standing there listening. Underneath it, carrying a question they're not going to ask. What does this mean for the craft we've given our lives to? Where do we fit when the machine can do what took us decades to do, to learn and to feel? That fear lived deep in their chest, not in their head. It wasn't irrational. It was human. And it's the same fear that's sitting quietly in a lot of leaders right now. And not the fear of technology, the fear of becoming unnecessary. But here's what happened over time. The machines got better, and the distillers became more important, not less. Because the technology couldn't walk into a rickhouse and just know that something was off before the instrument said so. It couldn't taste a barrel at year 4 and decided it needed 2 more years. It couldn't imagine what a particular spirit could become if you had the patience to let it. It couldn't decide. And great whiskey is never about production. It's about discernment, about knowing what to keep and what to let go, what needs more time and what's ready. Technology improved the production. It elevated the importance of the craft. The machine could execute, but it was distillers who still had to decide. And that distinction between execution and decision, between production and craft, is exactly what this moment is asking every leader to consider. I've lived a version of this. Not AI, but the same gap, the same feeling. It was 2010, 2011, around there. Take yourself back there for a second. Facebook was still finding its footing. Twitter was new enough that most organizations hadn't decided what to do with it. The iPhone was only a few years old. The idea that a customer would publicly post a complaint on social media and expect a response in real time was not yet in anyone's policy manual. At the time, I was responsible for social media for Firestone Complete Auto Care, part of Bridgestone, one of the most innovative companies in the world. A global organization that leads in tire technology, materials science, safety innovation. This was not a company that didn't understand disruption. And yet, customers had already decided on their own, without asking anybody, that social media was a customer service channel. Across 2,200 stores, roughly 40 customers a day in each, in an industry where trust is already fragile before anyone walks through the door. And they were talking publicly about their experiences, about the repairs, about feeling unheard. Inside the organization, the conversations were going in a different direction. Lawyers wanted policies. Leaders wanted to understand the implications. Departments debated ownership. And customer service was clear. This is a marketing problem. I remember sitting in meetings with customer service, showing them actual posts, real complaints, real customers waiting for someone to respond. And I asked them a simple question. If this exact message came in as an email, what would you do? They said that they would handle it according to the protocol. So I asked, then why is this different? We went round and round. Customer service felt it wasn't their channel. Marketing felt it wasn't their expertise. Legal wanted guardrails before anyone said anything publicly. Meanwhile, the posts kept coming. And while a complaint went unanswered, something predictable happened. Other customers showed up in the comments to share their own experiences. One unanswered post became a thread. A thread became a brand moment, and a brand moment in an industry where trust is already thin. I showed the marketing team one of those threads. Then I asked the customer service a different question. What happens if I say the wrong thing? That landed differently. Because suddenly the risk wasn't about channel ownership anymore. It was about the brand, about real customers, about what it meant to leave people without a response in a public space. That's when things started to move. Slowly, at first. A single person assigned to handle handoffs between marketing and customer service. Then eventually a customer service rep who could respond directly, because some issues could be resolved without going through the traditional process. And over time, we built something, an entirely new process, a framework that legal could work with, a bridge between the new environment and the existing organization. No one handed us a playbook. We wrote it as we went along. Now look at today. Nobody debates whether to respond to customers on social media. That question is so settled, it's almost hard to remember when it was ever a question. Not because Twitter won, but because the customer mattered. The technology changed the environment where the relationship existed. The stewardship didn't change. And I think that's exactly where a lot of leaders are right now, standing in a gap between where the environment is going and where the organization is ready to follow, between what's being asked of them and what the playbook they've spent a career building was designed to handle. Feeling the weight of people counting on them to figure it out without a playbook, writing it as they go. That gap is real, and it's lonely in the same way. So here's what I keep coming back to. When leaders ask, what does AI mean for my organization? They're asking a real question. But underneath it, almost always is a personal question. What does this mean for what I've built? For the expertise I've spent years developing? For the way I've been creating value and the way that I've been measuring my own worth? That question doesn't make it into the meeting, but it is in the room. And it hits differently depending on where you're standing. Employees are largely asking, how can AI help me? That's a tool question, a productive question, a completely reasonable place to start. But leaders are often carrying something heavier. Leadership has never been primarily about production. It's been about stewardship. I think about a leader I've spent time with recently, sitting across from me, talking about AI, what it meant for their team, their organization, and their future. And then it went quiet. Not because they didn't have thoughts about this, but because underneath the thoughts was something harder to talk about. What if the thing I've spent 20 years building is no longer the thing that matters most? That's not a technology question. That's a stewardship question. And stewardship has always been more craft than process. There is no dashboard for trust, no algorithm for wisdom, no prompt that creates belonging, no tool that tells you what integrity requires when a decision gets hard and the right answer isn't obvious and people are watching how you handle it. Technology can assist with almost everything, but it can't own the things that make leadership matter. Discernment, judgment, presence. The ability to sit with someone in the middle of uncertainty and help them find their footing. Those things don't become less valuable when technology gets more capable. They become more visible. Which brings us back to the Kentucky Rickhouse. The distillers who stood in front of new equipment a century ago faced the same questions leaders are facing now. The machine changed what they did every day, but it didn't change what they were responsible for. They were still responsible for the spirit, what it became, what it expressed, whether it was worthy of the name on the bottle. Technology improved the production, but the craft still required a human. The machine could execute. The distiller still had to decide. AI can execute. Leaders still decide. AI can generate. Leaders still discern. AI can process. leaders still steward. That distinction isn't going away. It may be the most important leadership distinction of this era, and that's the reframe worth sitting with. AI is not coming for your leadership. It may be coming for the parts of your role that were never really leadership to begin with. The production, the information gathering, the first drafts and the pattern recognition, and the administrative weight that accumulated around the real work over time. When that gets lighter, and it will, what remains is the craft, the judgment, the discernment, the stewardship, the uniquely human things that technology cannot replace, cannot replicate, and that this moment may actually be asking you to lean into more than ever before. That's not a threat. That's an invitation. So what I find interesting about this conversation is that it isn't new territory for Crafted Clarity. We've been circling this same tension from different angles for a while now. We've talked about identity, specifically about the things that attach themselves to who we are without us ever choosing them. The roles that become proof of our worth. The expertise that quietly becomes a source of our value in ways we never consciously decided. We've talked about seasons, the tension of being pulled between what we built and what we're being called toward. The disorienting middle where both are true at the same time. AI is just surfacing the same territory, just louder and faster, and with a lot more people paying attention. If any of that feels relevant to where you are right now, I want to introduce you to something we've built specifically for moments like these. It's called The Still. It's not a search engine, it's a place to reflect. You go there, you type what's actually sitting with you. Not a topic, not a podcast category, just the honest thing. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing right now. I feel like I'm supposed to have the answers, and I don't have them. Something is shifting, and I can't name it yet. The Still will find the Crafted Clarity conversations that meet you there. Because sometimes you don't need more content. You just need the right conversation at the right time. And that's what The Still is for. You can find that on our website. If this conversation resonated, if something in here named attention you've been carrying, there's more waiting for you. The podcast is just the front door. At craftedclarity.net, you'll find the full catalog of conversations and everything else we've built for leaders who are ready to join us in these conversations. If you've ever gone to a whiskey tasting, you know the notes come at the end. Not to tell you what you should have tasted, but to give language to what was already there. That's what these are. First, this conversation began with AI, but it was never really about AI. It was about what happens when a leader looks at changing environment and asks, where do I fit in this? That question isn't weakness. It's wisdom. The distillers who stood in front of new equipment a century ago felt that question. They weren't falling behind. They were paying attention to the right thing. The leaders carrying that tension right now are doing the same. Second, the tension underneath this conversation isn't really about adoption or resistance. It's about attachment. Many of us have attached our sense of value, our sense of being needed, being capable, being relevant to those things that we didn't consciously choose. The expertise, the answers, the production, the pace. And when the environment shifts, those attachments get exposed. We've lived and worked long enough for them to form. That's not a failure. That's just what happens when you're given your life to something that mattered. Third, technology changes what we do. It doesn't change what we're responsible for. The distiller's responsibility was never to the equipment. It was to the spirit, what it became, what it expressed, whether it was worthy of the name on the bottle. Your responsibility as a leader isn't to the tools. It's to the people, to the mission, the culture, and the calling. The technology changes around that. The stewardship remains. And the last one, what is uniquely yours to do in this season? Not what AI can't do. What only you can bring to these people in this moment with the history and the judgment and the presence you've spent a career developing. That question isn't answered in a single conversation, but it is worth starting. The most significant technological shifts don't just change how we work. They change how we see ourselves. The leaders who flourish in this area won't necessarily be the ones who master every tool. They'll be the ones who understand what technology can do, what it cannot do, and where they are uniquely called to serve. The craft remains. The stewardship remains. The question isn't whether we're willing to own it. Actually, that is the question. The question is whether we're willing to own it. We started today with a question that's sitting in a lot of leadership conversations right now. When the tools get smarter, what makes us a human leader? What makes the leader human? I've been sitting with this for a while, and here's where I keep landing. The distillers who stood in that Kentucky Rickhouse 100 years ago didn't become less important when the machines got better. They became more visible because the machine handled what could be handled. And what remained, the judgment, the discernment, the responsibility for what the spirit would become, was always the real work. It just wasn't always the most visible work. AI is doing something similar for leadership. It's handling things that can be handled. And what remains, the stewardship, the presence, the ability to help people navigate uncertainty and find meaning in the middle of disruption, it's about to become the most visible work too. That's the invitation. To every leader carrying this question right now, pay attention to the right thing. And that's where clarity starts. I'm Steve Moscato, and this is Crafted Clarity. And remember, clarity isn't found. It's crafted. Thanks for listening to Crafted Clarity. If you're a leader wrestling with the tension between success and significance, or if you're trying to align your work with a deeper calling, I'd love to connect with you. If your organization is facing questions about strategy, whether it's alignment, ROI, or building confidence in your team, this is the work we do every day at iBrand. And if you walk this journey yourself, or maybe you're right in the middle of it, I'd love to hear your story and maybe even share it here on the podcast. You can find me at craftedclarity.net.